Cairo, September 9th, 2025. In a carefully staged but deeply symbolic moment, Iran and the United Nations nuclear watchdog formally signed a new cooperation framework, ending months of deadlock and diplomatic chill. The agreement, signed in the Egyptian capital, marks the first serious step since the June war with Israel toward resuming technical engagement between Tehran and the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. The setting was grand but understated. Cameras captured Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi walking into the hall alongside IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi. Both men had arrived with the weight of history pressing on their shoulders. They shook hands firmly, exchanged polite nods, and sat side by side as the document was placed before them. Within minutes, their signatures sealed the framework that could alter the trajectory of Iran's nuclear diplomacy. The ceremony did not stop at symbolism. The presence of Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati, who joined them at the press conference that followed, underscored Cairo's role as a host and mediator in a region that remains haunted by conflict and mistrust. Araghchi's words set the tone for how Tehran wants the deal interpreted. He reminded observers that this was not a surrender of sovereignty, nor a one-sided concession to international pressure, but rather a structured path forward under equal terms. Speaking with deliberate emphasis, he declared, Abbas Araghchi said, "The agreement establishes a practical modality for cooperation that reflects both the extraordinary security situation Iran faces and the agency's technical requirements. It guarantees that cooperation continues in a manner that respects Iran's sovereignty and addresses the agency's verification requirements." The statement, direct and uncompromising, framed Iran as both a cooperating partner and a sovereign state, unwilling to compromise on dignity. The timing of his emphasis was critical. After months of regional escalation, including Israeli strikes that reignited anxieties about Iran's nuclear ambitions, Tehran wanted to make clear it would cooperate, but only on its own terms. He went further, cautioning the IAEA against assuming its role was merely supervisory. Cooperation, he insisted, must be mutual. Araghchi said, "Cooperation is not a one-way street. In return for Iran's commitments, the agency also has specific responsibilities, and we expect it to fully adhere to them and maintain its impartiality, independence, and professionalism." That point was so important to him that he repeated it later in slightly varied form, reiterating his expectation that impartiality and professionalism remain non-negotiable. It was a signal to Western capitals. Iran would not tolerate political bias hidden behind technical oversight. But the sharpest note came when he outlined the consequences of any hostile turn in the international environment. Araghchi said, "I shall stress that in case of any hostile act against my country and in the event of re-imposition of terminated United Nations Security Council resolutions, Iran will regard these practical steps as terminated." In those words lay both warning and strategy. Iran was offering cooperation, but also holding a sword over the table, ready to walk away if global powers, particularly the United States or its allies, sought to use sanctions or UN resolutions as leverage. For Rafael Grossi, the moment was less about political grandstanding and more about restoring the IAEA's core function, inspections. His remarks carried a mix of caution and optimism, acknowledging the fragile balance required to make technical work succeed in such a highly politicized arena. Rafael Grossi said, "What we have done today, what we have concluded," as Foreign Minister Araghchi was just saying, "may not be or appear to be grandiose because it's a technical document. It's a document that refers to how we can resume the indispensable inspection work that we have to carry out in Iran in accordance with the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons." His framing emphasized practicality. It was not a sweeping diplomatic breakthrough nor a new political deal, but a return to the nuts and bolts of verification, something he deemed indispensable. Grossi, who has often played the role of diplomat-technocrat, wanted the world to understand that the value of the document lay in its ability to revive inspection channels, not in dramatic declarations. Yet he also recognized the symbolic step forward. Grossi said, "This is a step in the right direction. This is a door we are opening, and of course there are many things that still need to happen. We have to implement it in good faith. Others around the world can help us." That note of optimism, cautious but firm, echoed his belief that technical agreements could create momentum for broader political de-escalation if global powers chose to support the process. The choice of Cairo as the venue was no accident. Egypt, with its historical role as a mediator between regional powers, provided neutral ground. For Iran, it was a space where cooperation could be framed not as submission to Western capitals, but as a sovereign act conducted in the Arab world. For the IAEA, it was an opportunity to show engagement outside Vienna or Geneva in a regional setting closer to the tensions at hand. Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati's presence added weight. Egypt has long sought to balance its relationships with the West, the Arab world, and Iran. Hosting the signing allowed Cairo to present itself as a stabilizing actor in a volatile Middle East. This agreement comes against the backdrop of turbulence. The June war with Israel left scars not only on Gaza but also across the region, with Tehran once again in the crosshairs of suspicion regarding its nuclear activities. The suspension of cooperation with the IAEA during those months heightened concerns, especially in Europe and Washington, that Iran might use the cover of conflict to advance its nuclear program unchecked. At the same time, Iran has been navigating a complex sanctions environment. The threat of reimposed UN Security Council resolutions looms large. Araghchi's warning made it clear if old punitive measures resurface, the agreement would collapse instantly. For Washington, the deal presents a test. On the one hand, it signals that Tehran is still willing to engage within the framework of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. On the other hand, the US and its allies will be scrutinizing every move for signs of stalling, deception, or escalation. Grossi's insistence on impartiality and technical focus was a subtle appeal not to politicize the work ahead. Observers see the Cairo framework as fragile but significant. It is not a grand bargain. It does not address the broader geopolitical rifts or the underlying mistrust that define Iran's relations with Israel, the US, and Europe. But it reopens channels that had been closed, allowing inspectors back on the ground and re-establishing a working rhythm between Tehran and the IAEA. For Iran, the framework projects an image of a responsible state engaging with international norms while preserving sovereignty. For the IAEA, it restores a degree of access critical to ensuring transparency. For Egypt, it reinforces its position as a host of regional diplomacy. The risks remain enormous. A single Israeli strike, a new round of US sanctions, or a regional escalation could derail the fragile cooperation. Araghchi's warning about terminating the agreement in response to hostile acts is not theoretical. It is a policy declaration. As cameras rolled in Cairo, the images told a story of measured optimism, two men signing papers, shaking hands, and presenting themselves before the world as guardians of a delicate new framework. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi laid down red lines about sovereignty, responsibilities, and retaliation. IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi highlighted technical necessity and a cautious path forward. Egypt's role as host added regional legitimacy. Whether this framework becomes a foundation for stability or collapses under the weight of geopolitics remains uncertain. But for now, Cairo has offered the world a reminder. Even in times of war and mistrust, diplomacy still has a chance to breathe.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السيدات والسادة الحضور.
The agreement establishes a practical modality for cooperation that reflects both the extraordinary security situation Iran faces and the agency's technical requirements. It guarantees that cooperation continues in a manner that respects Iran's sovereignty and addresses the agency's verification requirements. At the same time, Iran is demonstrating responsibility and restraint by reaching an agreement with the agency to enable the continuation of cooperation despite unlawful aggression. We expect the agency and the international community to uphold international law and condemn these attacks. cooperation is not a one-way street. In return for Iran's commitments, the agency also has specific responsibilities, and we expect it to fully adhere to them and maintain its impartiality, independence, and professionalism. I shall stress that in case of any hostile act against my country, and in the event of reimposition of terminated United Nations Security Council resolutions, Iran will regard these practical steps as terminated. Thank you.
What we have done today, what we have concluded, as Foreign Minister Araghchi was just saying, may not be or appear to be grandiose, because it's a technical document. It's a document that refers to how we can resume the indispensable inspection work that we have to carry out in Iran in accordance with the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and the corresponding treaty. This is a step in the right direction. This is a door we are opening. And of course, there are many things that still need to happen. We have to implement it in good faith. Others around the world can help us.